How's everybody doing out there today? We are here today to take a look at a video that the history guy put out. A lot of you have recommended that I check out this video. Now, I am a fan of the history guy. I've seen a lot of his work, and like I say, I'm a fan. But I have not seen this particular video. It apparently is talking about the guns themselves on the Battleship Texas. Maybe not so much as the Battleship Texas. I don't know. I'll find out once we get into this. But from what I understand from the title anyway, it looks like he's just talking about the guns on the Battleship Texas. So anyway, I don't want to bore you with a bunch of talking, so let's get into this thing. I love his bow tie. I love the man's bow tie at the
Perhaps
opening.
the most visible thing that makes a battleship are her guns. Not just the huge main guns on her turrets, but the many dozens of...
Now, one thing I noticed right off bat is he is holding a model of the original configuration of the battleship. No anti-aircraft guns at that time because aircraft were not a situation at that time. But I love his little model.
Smaller guns that dot her superstructure. And few guns have seen as much history as the guns of USS Texas. USS Texas saw many changes, refits, modernizations, and upgrades over her long career to meet the changing needs of the Navy. And her guns, which cleared the way for invasions in North Africa and Normandy, on the Riviera and at Okinawa.
Anybody know where I can get one?
Well, they have their story to tell. The guns of USS Texas deserve to be remembered. When USS Texas was commissioned in March of 1914, she became the first American ship to carry the cutting-edge 14-inch 45 caliber guns as her main battery. This gun would be the main battery on Texas and her sister New York, as well as the Nevada and Pennsylvania-class battleships. The guns were designed to fire 1,400-pound armor-piercing rounds, each filled...
Now look at the size of those shells. It's enormous. I know if you've been on board this ship like I have, there's, now and then a shell sitting around for you to look at. But look at them on the deck, all sprawled out like that with these men around it. Enormous. Oh, wait, what else can you say? I mean, I know a 16-inch gun is 2 inches bigger, so it's going to be even larger, but this just looks enormous.
With 31.5 pounds of the explosive dunite and propelled by a normal charge of 4 bags of smokeless powder, weighing 105 pounds each. The shells were more than 60% larger than the 870-pound shells of the 12-inch guns of the preceding Wyoming-class battleships.
I'm watching on my laptop. Cut that finger off at one point in time in my life. They were able to reconnect it, but it doesn't work except at the hand joint. Kind of looks a little funny, don't it? Never noticed. I just noticed it when I was pointing and it didn't curve down. Anyway, beside the point, right?
At a 15-degree angle, they could fire a shell out to 23,000 yards.
Long way.
The guns were approved in part as a response to other navies beginning to use 13.5-inch guns. Previously, the largest guns aboard U.S. ships were 12-inch guns. Including the breech, each gun weighed an astounding 142,492 pounds, and Texas mounted 10 of them in 5 turrets, each weighing 506 tons. Uniquely, the Texas and the New York stored and transported their rounds nose down in cast-iron cups.
Now, that's a unique way of storing ammunition, as most of you know, the Texas and the New York. I believe there was a few other ships that stored ammunition nose down. You would think that would be how you wouldn't want to store it, but they know more about it than we do.
14-inch guns were also given to the UK, where they were used aboard Abercrombie-class monitors. Following World War I, most of the 14-inch guns in the fleet were upgraded to fire new, larger shells. However, the New York-class
now that looks like the ships or the shells you see on the ship.
Their shell hoists could not accommodate them. Instead, special shorter versions of the new shells were produced for the Texas and the New York. In the initial bombardment against Pointe du Hoc on the morning of June 6, 1944, the USS Texas fired 255 14-inch shells.
There it is.
About 178.5
I love the man's bow tie.
In 34 minutes, an average of about 7.5 shells a minute. Texas was also armed with a second battery of 21 5-inch 51 caliber guns. The 5-inch guns, more numerous, were originally designed to engage destroyers, patrol boats, and other surface targets, though throughout their service on Texas they were also used widely in shore bombardment. The guns were initially mounted 10 to the side and one in the stern. In 1917, after the U.S. had entered World War I, but before Texas was sent across the Atlantic, 5 of the guns were removed, leaving 8 per side.
Now that gun right there, I think we've all, anyway, if you've been to the ship, you've stood by that gun, and last time I was at the ship, it had that plastic bag on it. So this is apparently a very recent photograph.
As guns near the ends of the ship proved difficult to work in any kind of seas. In 1916, the Texas became the testing ground for a new kind of gun. Initially, the New York-class ships had not been designed with consideration for naval aviation and had no anti-aircraft defenses. Only in World War I had the threat of aerial attacks become a reality, one that would prove to massively alter naval warfare in the ensuing decades. Texas was fitted with 2 3-inch 50-caliber anti-aircraft guns, one each atop her boat cranes, becoming the first U.S. battleship to mount anti-aircraft guns. The 3-inch 50 caliber had been installed on other ships before, but only in low-angle, non-anti-aircraft roles, while the ones on the Texas were dual-purpose and could be used against both aerial and surface targets.
Now, I've seen this picture all over the place and various other pictures like it. It seems to me like supplying ammunition up there would have been a difficult proposition, to say the least. Not only that, but all those men in a battle situation running around, moving that gun around, loading it, just seems like a very dangerous place to put an anti-aircraft gun. But it was the first usage of anti-aircraft weapons, so surely it was, in an experimental stage. They didn't exactly know where was the best place to put it, so they put it up high where the aircraft are, I assume. But it just seems like a very precarious place to put a gun, men, ammunition flowing faster than they can move it. Just seems wrong right from the get-go.
Their placements on the Texas signaled the beginning of a new era, not surprising for a ship that was often used as a technological test bed. By World War II, many ships, including destroyer escorts, patrol frigates, minesweepers, and subchasers, were equipped with the same guns. The Texas was also the first American ship equipped with early fire control systems, analog precursors to modern computer fire control. These kinds of systems would allow Navy ships to fire farther and more accurately than ever before. These upgrades would become standard, just like the proliferation of anti-aircraft guns, placing Texas
a man would have to know what he's doing
of weapon technology. And the guns of USS Texas made themselves heard in more ways than one. Immediately after the U.S. declaration of war on April 6, 1917, the Texas spent about 5 months training Naval Armed Guard gun crews for service on armed merchant ships. Among those trained was a detachment assigned to man 3 Spanish-American War-era 6-inch 40-caliber deck guns mounted on the chartered Army transport SS Mongolia. On April 19th, the Mongolia was the first American vessel to test the German submarine blockade of Europe, encountering a U-boat 7 miles off Beachy Head in the English Channel. The USS Texas trained crew fired upon the German submarine, driving it off and possibly sinking the sub, making it the first armed engagement of a U.S. ship with a German one after the declaration of war.
Now that's pretty incredible, and that's something I did not know, that one of the guns that were removed from Texas took one of the very first, if not the first, shot of World War II. That's pretty amazing. Yeah, Texas was spreading the love.
So, if only to train the crews of another vessel, the guns of Texas made themselves heard in America's opening shots of the First World War.
All right, what's going on right here? Obviously, it's being launched from the Texas, but it's got wheels, not flotation devices, so it ain't coming back to the Texas, that's for sure. I'm assuming they are close to land somewhere doing this first launch, apparently. March 9th, 19, looks like. But I know the later aircraft had flotation devices on it. That's the aircraft we all seen. This one, though, it's not coming back to the Texas. It's going landlocked somewhere.
After the war, Texas again was the test ground for new technology, becoming the first ship to launch a plane from a battleship when Edward McDonnell threw a Sopwith Camel off the ship at Guantanamo Bay. This was another important innovation, as the plane's purpose was to serve as a spotter for the fall of shells of the main battery. The test proved that plane spotters were much more accurate,
one with the
and
flotation
testimony to the
devices.
Naval Board, a Navy sailor reported that the increase in effectiveness might be as much as 200%. All of the fleet's battleships and new cruisers would be equipped with float planes for spotter duty as a result. And as the U.S. entered the Second World War, the guns of USS Texas would make themselves heard again in a very unique way, in faraway Wake Island in the Pacific. Wake Island was originally claimed by the United States in 1899.
Texas wasn't at Wake Island. At least not in the beginning of the war. I have no clue what it's leading to. I don't know if you do or not, but I don't.
9. After the annexation of the Philippines and Hawaii, it was thought to be a good location for a coaling station. It wasn't until January of 1941 that the U.S. Navy began building a military base on the atoll. President Roosevelt issued an executive order to establish Pacific defenses a month later. By August, detachments of the newly created Marine Defense Battalions arrived, bringing with them 6 5-inch 51 caliber guns, required as part of the regulations of the armament of a military base, which by October were in place.
Were these 5-inch guns the guns from the Texas? I think that's where this is heading, but I have never heard this before. If you've heard this before, leave me a comment. Let me know what you know about this. I am a historian at heart, especially the World War II generation. But I've never heard this, but maybe that's not where he's going. We'll find out.
These guns had originally been mounted aboard USS Texas.
Yeah, there it is.
Had been removed in a refit and were repurposed for use by the Marines. The new base at Wake Island was hastily put together. And
now, see, I'm mind blown right there. The guns that were removed from the Texas, one was placed on another ship, took shots at a German submarine, or was that Japanese submarine? Took shots at a submarine anyway. I'm old. My memory fails every 30 seconds, so forgive me. But it's starting to sound like the guns of Texas were also on Wake Island, defending from that invasion as well. This is news to me. It's news.
Severely undermanned when the Japanese attacked it at the same time as they attacked Pearl Harbor, though on December 8th, as the island was on the other side of the international date line. There were some 450 Marines on the island, about 2,100 less than would have been officially deemed adequate to protect the island. Defense forces had just learned about the attack in Hawaii when Japanese bombers struck at Wake, destroying 8 of their 12 Wildcat fighters on the ground. Despite more air raids over the next few days, the Japanese failed to destroy any of the island's gun emplacements. In the early morning hours of December 11th, the Japanese South Seas Force attempted to land on the island. The attack group included 2 cruisers, 6 destroyers, and a number of smaller craft. Major James Devereaux, the Marine commander, ordered his gunners to hold fire until the enemy moved within range of the coastal defenses. The Japanese commander opened fire with his ships, but when the island didn't return fire, sent in the landing craft, thinking that the base's defenses had already been disabled. Battery L opened fire on the destroyer Hayate at about 4,000 yards, hitting the ship's magazine, or at least something explosive, as the whole ship blew up, with the loss of nearly all hands.
Wow.
At around the same time, pilots and the remaining Wildcat fighters dropped bombs and sank a second destroyer.
That was 3
The Japanese
Wildcats.
invasion turned off, and the island was safe, at
4
least for
Wildcats.
the time being. It was the only time in the Second World War that an amphibious invasion was repulsed by shore batteries, and the guns of those batteries had come from USS Texas.
Your frosty mug taste, take 1.
Action!
Wow, is this
Does
frosty?
yours taste as frosty as mine?
Give me my frosty mug back.
What are you, nuts?
No, actually, we're fruit.
A&W, we've got that frosty mug taste.
An invasion repulsed by 450 Marines. Don't know how many Japanese invaders there were, But you know when you're going to do a landing, you got way more men than what you think you're going to need. So that's an amazing feat. Although we all know Wake Island was eventually lost or surrendered. And I don't want to second guess the commander there, but surrendering, I can only assume was their only choice. Low on food, low on water, low on ammunition, and no help on the way. So I guess he did what was right. The American prisoners were treated extremely poorly by the Japanese at that time.
Despite the bravery of the defenders and the protection of the Texas guns, the island fell 2 weeks later after a second landing and brief but vicious fighting.
All right, I got to back that up a little
During
bit.
the
Because
war,
I'm
the
talking
Texas
too
would be
much.
continually refitted with new guns, similar to how almost all American ships. Despite the bravery of the defenders and the protection of the Texas guns, the island fell 2 weeks later after a second.
See, that's what I thought he said. The guns that helped repulse the first landing attempt by the Japanese on Wake Island, the 5-inch guns, came from the USS Texas. Absolutely did not know that. Did you know that? I mean, I'm kind of mind blown because I had no idea. I know basic history of Wake Island, that the Japanese were repulsing. I know all those stories. Did not know that the guns were from the USS Texas. Like I said, Texas is spreading the love.
Landing and brief but vicious fighting. During the war, the Texas would be continually refitted with new guns, similar to how almost all American ships were in response to one threat: planes. In 1942, even more of the second battery of 5-inch guns were removed, leaving only 6. The 1.1-inch anti-aircraft guns were replaced with 40mm Bofors. The Bofors guns had begun development in 1928, and after dealing with issues of feeding ammo into the gun, it was ready for production by 1933. The original versions were actually ordered specifically for use aboard submarines, but were quickly adopted by multiple navies as anti-aircraft weapons and used widely by the Allies throughout World War II. By 1944, the Texas was also equipped with 44 Oerlikon anti-air cannons, 20mm cannons designed by the Switzerland-based firm. The United Kingdom had been working with the Oerlikon company to modify the 20mm guns, and 2 designs were ready by 1939.
All these guns are fearsome in their own right. But that rascal right there, that's a beast when it comes to trying to get an aircraft past it.
The UK ordered 1,500 of the guns in 1939, but delays and the fall of France in 1940 meant that only a handful managed to reach the UK. In October of 1939, a deal was reached to assign manufacturing rights to the guns in the UK. In fact, before the fall of France, the UK had millions of pounds in orders from Swiss contracts for food, raw materials, textiles, munitions, and more, with the largest contract being the Oerlikon guns at £5 million. The guns were considered by the UK to be absolutely vital as the first line of defense as far as the anti-aircraft protection was concerned. The initial orders for the Oerlikon guns were to be ready by July of 1940, with the rest delivered by April of 1941. Problems arose because the Swiss military demanded its own supply.
What kind of sight is that right there? It almost looks like a TV screen. Is it just I mean, I know there's some of you out there that know, so is that just a clear glass sight with crosshairs in it? What is that? I mean, it looks like some kind of screen. It's got a lot of wires running to it. It's got adjustment knobs. And it's been a long time since I've been on the Texas and have seen one of those. So somebody tell me in the comments what kind of aiming setup that is. It's got to be electronic, not just visual. Somebody let me know.
And of course, more seriously, the invasion of France in May of 1940. By the end of the month, the UK had less than 100 Oerlikons on hand, and essentially no plan to produce any more for the British. Fortunately, on May 24th, the Oerlikon firm handed over the technical documents to start producing
that
the
one right there looks like it just has a...
On June 16th, they were smuggled out of Switzerland by Stuart Mitchell, a civilian on the staff of the Chief Inspector of Naval Ordnance.
Device on it.
He attempted to
So
leave
maybe
first
that
via
is
southern
something
France,
that was
but found a
placed
way
on the
blocked by the
Texas, I'm not
Wehrmacht,
sure.
and so instead took
Like I
a
say,
long
somebody
route
let me
through the
know what's up
Balkans
with that.
to Turkey, Palestine, and Egypt before returning to London. Rapidly falling France necessitated that the UK secure as much as they could from the Swiss firms before the two countries were cut off from one another. 35 Oerlikon guns were snuck out on June 10th, the day that Italy entered the war. Despite the difficulties, new manufacturing facilities for the Oerlikon guns were established in the UK, while 1,000 of the guns remained stranded in Switzerland. Production began in England at the end of 1940, and the first delivery to the Navy occurred in the spring of 1941. Negotiations continued with Oerlikon well into 1942, though it would be Allied factories that produced the gun in enormous numbers for use in Allied navies. The Oerlikon became ubiquitous on Royal Navy ships, and by 1942 the Oerlikon was replacing the M2 Browning on American ships as well. By 1945, some 55,000 Oerlikons were aboard Royal Navy ships. After All
right, there's is that a different aiming sight? It appears to be. One of them looked like a TV screen. One of them looked like just a pipe. And now we've got a third type. I'm sure they're, over the months, probably. I was going to say years, but probably over the months, things like that changed constantly. I'm still curious about the one that looks like a TV, though, or a screen at least.
Fits. By 1944, the Texas only mounted 6 of her original 21
Look at
5-inch
that. Look at
51
the Texas
caliber
boy.
guns,
She's armed.
but mounted 44 Oerlikons aboard, in addition to 10 quad-mounted 40mm Bofors guns. The Oerlikons were used so extensively by the United States that they accounted for 32% of all Japanese aircraft shot down by the Americans between December of 1941 and September of 1944.
32% of Japanese aircraft shot down were shot down by the Oerlikon. Look at that. And that's probably not all of them on that side of the ship. How do you get anything past that? Anything. Incredible.
In the 1945 Battle of Okinawa, Texas expended 3,100 40mm and 2,275 20mm rounds against air and shore targets, claiming 1 kill of the dreaded Kamikaze planes used so extensively in the battle, on her own, and 3 assists. It turns out that the guns of USS Texas made contributions even beyond the battles in which the great ship fought, to the crews that she trained, the technologies that she pioneered, and even the guns that she discarded. The guns of the Texas roared often during the Second World War, in Africa for Operation Torch, at Normandy, the French Riviera during Operation Dragoon, and then across the ocean to support the landings at both Okinawa and Iwo Jima, and even in the brave defense of Wake Island. At Okinawa alone, Texas fired 2,019 14-inch, 2,600 45-inch, and 493-inch rounds in almost 7 weeks of action. Her guns were state-of-the-art, constantly upgraded to meet the changing needs of warfare and allowing her to remain relevant over decades of development of naval weapons technology, new technologies with which she was often at the very forefront. Heck, USS Texas was even the first American battleship to show a moving picture on board. And like the great ship herself, the guns of USS Texas each played their role in the Allied victory over the Axis powers. Battleship Texas will be going to Gulf Copper Shipyards in Galveston, Texas for repairs in Q2 of 2022. While in the yard, Texas will undergo an intensive repair period, which will include having new hull plating installed to the sides of the ship from about 4 feet above the waterline down. These repairs will take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to complete. And then there will be some dockside work that will occur afterwards, as the Battleship Texas Foundation will have to prepare the ship to become a museum ship once again. If you would like to stay up to date on the work, feel free to check out their website at battleshiptexas.org or at their YouTube channel. Both have regular updates posted to keep you appraised of the work that is currently going on. Come on, Texas.
Hoorah. All right, like I said, I love the history. I love the history guy. I love that video. It was full of some information I had no idea of. So I've got a few more reaction videos I'm going to do to the Fat Electrician, a couple that you guys have written me about concerning the Battleship Texas and a few other ships. I have not looked at those videos yet, although I have looked at some of his other videos. And Mr. Bowtie Man, the history guy, I really enjoyed that video. He's got another one of the Texas that I've already watched. So for right now, it's been a Jeep, a drone, the history guy, and an old man. We'll be seeing you next time. He was just here, I saw him. Yeah, okay, not as funny as I thought either.